Japanese adventurer Gump Suzuki arrives in Cape Town at the end of a more than 6,000-kilometer journey across Africa while pulling a rickshaw. That's at these times on World of Africa. On WION, World is One.
This week on Inside South Asia, Afghans who sided with America against the Taliban denied entry to the US under Trump's new immigration order. 6 months after the Yunus administration took charge, Bangladesh's economy is on the brink. Adding to the chaos is the White House cutting off all aid to Dhaka. And tragedy strikes at the Mahakumbh Mela in India. 30 people die in a stampede while 60 million take a holy dip at the Amrit Snan. All this and much more on Inside South Asia.
This week on Check It Out, we take an in-depth look into what DeepSeek is. We also show you a miniature farming robot and find out how drones are becoming smarter and more sophisticated. All this and more on WION World is One at these times.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Let's get started. Our top story tonight comes from West Asia. IDF strikes have reportedly killed at least 83 people in Lebanon ever since the ceasefire came into effect. The IDF, in fact, has unleashed a series of airstrikes on Lebanon's Bekaa Valley. The question is, what does all of this mean for the region? And where are things headed? Israel's war has clearly not stopped. That's coming up in just a bit. And here's a look at what else is lined up for you on the show tonight. The US Secretary of State is making it clear that the Russia-Ukraine war needs to end now. But how exactly will that happen? What are the unanswered questions surrounding the Washington plane crash? What all is known so far and what isn't? We tell you all that you need to know. All this and more coming up. top story tonight on Gravitas focuses on IDF strikes that have reportedly killed at least 83 people in Lebanon ever since the ceasefire came into effect. In the latest, in fact, the IDF has unleashed a series of airstrikes on Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, raising serious questions about Israel's commitment to ending hostilities and its refusal to abide by the previous withdrawal deadlines. A clear signal, in a way, that the war is really not over. Let's just break it all down for you. Earlier today, the Israeli military carried out multiple strikes in eastern Lebanon, reportedly targeting Hezbollah positions near the Syrian border. According to the IDF, these attacks hit underground facilities used to manufacture weapons and smuggling routes allegedly supplying arms to Hezbollah. Now, this move follows Israel's repeated refusal to pull back its troops from Lebanon. Under a ceasefire agreement that was brokered, Israel was supposed to withdraw its forces by January 26. Israel pushed the date back to February 18. Israel argues that the Lebanese army has failed to meet its end of the deal, an accusation that has only fueled further tensions. According to reports in Israeli media, the ceasefire agreement forbids Hezbollah from operating south of the Litani River, some 30 kilometers from Israel, and allows Israel to respond to imminent threats. Meanwhile, the death toll in Lebanon is rising rapidly. In just 2 months, at least 83 Lebanese have reportedly been killed by Israeli strikes. And that number, by the way, does not reportedly include the hundreds more who have been injured, many of them displaced residents trying to return to their homes. Just this past week, Israeli forces reportedly killed at least 24 people in southern Lebanon as they attempted to go back to their villages. And Israeli airstrikes are not stopping. According to Lebanese media, the IDF has repeatedly violated the ceasefire agreement this week, launching attacks on Lebanese border towns like Tebe and Kafar Killa. While an IDF strike on Tuesday hit Nabati al-Foqa, where 20 people have reportedly been injured in an attack on a pickup truck. In fact, the second strike, according to reports, hit the Farah City Amusement Park, located along a nearby road, injuring 4 people. An IDF drone attack in southern Lebanon village of Majdal Salem left at least 5 people injured, sending another reminder that the war is far from over. So, what does all of this really mean? Israel's war has not ended, it's perhaps evolving. Despite ceasefire agreements, the violence persists with rising casualties, missed deadlines, and relentless attacks. This conflict is clearly showing no signs of slowing down. The question is, will Israel withdraw its forces from southern Lebanon in 3 weeks? Meanwhile, the US is carrying out its own deadly operations in the region. On Thursday, an American airstrike in northwest Syria killed a senior operative linked to the Al-Qaeda affiliated group Horas al-Din. According to the US Central Command, this was part of Washington's ongoing drone warfare campaign in West Asia. Reportedly, Hamas is handing out gift bags to Israeli hostages before releasing them. And what was inside them? Reportedly, photos of their time in captivity, maps of Gaza, and certificates labeled with their release decision. Just have a look at these visuals. 20-year-old Israeli hostage and soldier Agam Berger is being escorted to the stage by Hamas fighters and holding a framed certificate. In the background are damaged buildings with giant Palestinian flags, decorations, onlookers, a convoy of the Red Cross. Now, these certificates have reportedly sparked outrage in Israel. Israeli media, in fact, is calling it a cruel psychological game. On Thursday, Hamas freed 3 Israeli and 5 Thai hostages in Gaza, while Israel released 110 Palestinian prisoners after delaying the process in anger at the swarming crowds at one of the hostage handover points. Hours later, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, quote-unquote, said, whoever dares to harm hostages will pay the price. Listen in.
Agam, Arbel, Gadi.
We made it clear to the mediators that we do not intend to accept any risk to our hostages. And I'll add, whoever dares to harm our hostages will pay the price.
קודם כל, בזכות חיילינו הגיבורים.
Hamas, meanwhile, has said it will release 3 Israeli hostages tomorrow under the ceasefire deal with Israel. With outrage over the certificates we just told you about and Netanyahu's warning, the developments carry far-reaching implications.
Director of National Intelligence, my responsibility.
Shifting focus now to the US, where the spotlight is on President Donald Trump's intel chief pick, Tulsi Gabbard. Specifically, her secret meetings with former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in 2017. On Thursday, during her confirmation hearing, which lasted for hours, Gabbard faced tough questioning from both Republicans and Democrats. What did she discuss with al-Assad? What could there have been to talk about? Remember, the US has designated Syria as a state sponsor of terrorism since 1979. So why was Gabbard meeting with the president? And not just once, but twice. These are crucial questions. After all, Gabbard is the US president's pick to oversee 18 US intelligence agencies and will be entrusted with a $100 billion annual budget for America's intelligence operations. When she returned to Washington from the secret meeting with Assad 8 years ago, she was greeted with a flurry of criticism. But at the time, you see, Gabbard defended her trip, saying that she wanted a peaceful resolution to the long and bloody conflict. Still, despite her justifications, details of what the two actually discussed remained a mystery. Her trip had come after the US government had demanded Assad step down because of his government's attacks against Syrian civilians, including allegedly with chemical weapons. Even at the time, her trip drew criticism from lawmakers on both sides. But now it has taken fresh importance. That's because in Syria, rebels have removed Assad from power, and President Trump has nominated her to be America's spy chief. At the hearing on Thursday, Gabbard told lawmakers that she asked Assad, quote-unquote, tough questions about his own regime's actions. In fact, she also tried to preemptively address any attacks over the visit, saying in her opening remarks, I'm quoting, I have no love for Assad or Gaddafi or any dictator, quote-unquote. Not just that, Gabbard also said that she shed no tears for the fall of the Assad regime. That's when the armed rebels, remember, had taken control of the Syrian city of Damascus. This was in December. During her confirmation hearing on Thursday, she was also pressed on meeting a Syrian cleric, Ahmad Bedreddin Hassoun, who had previously threatened to unleash suicide bombers in the United States if the American military intervened in his country. You see, Hassoun was appointed to the position of Grand Mufti, Syria's most senior Sunni Muslim cleric, by the Assad regime in 2005. He was an Assad loyalist. When the country descended into civil war, he publicly warned Washington and other Western countries against taking military action against the government. When asked by Senator Martin Heinrich whether she was aware of the threat made by Hassoun, the former Grand Mufti of Syria, here's how Gabbard reacted. She said, and I'm quoting, I was not and had not heard that until today. But here's the kicker. Reports saying that Gabbard was aware of Hassoun's threats soon after she returned from her controversial visit to Syria. According to the Washington Post, Hassoun's comments on suicide bombers were flagged as problematic by one of her aides in early 2017. According to the report, when Gabbard was first invited to visit Syria by Ohio-based activists in November 2016, Hassoun was one of the people they said she would have the opportunity to meet. She eventually visited Syria as well as Lebanon the following January. According to her account of the trip, Gabbard met Hassoun on the afternoon of January 16, 2017, directly after meeting Assad and his wife, Asma. To this day, it's not clear what they discussed. Remember, as we mentioned earlier, Syria has long been designated a state sponsor of terrorism. And after the US shut its embassy there in 2012, Washington has had no diplomatic relations with the regime. US officials generally did not meet with regime officials, and the State Department advised against travel to the country. Now, despite her efforts to put jittery senators at ease on Thursday, it quickly became apparent senators are struggling to get past their hesitation to confirm her.
I would like to state a few other actions I would take if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence is number one, make sure that we don't have illegal and unconstitutional programs within the intelligence community, making sure that we enact security clearance reform to limit access to our nation's top secrets, make sure that every single person in the workforce understands their rights as whistleblowers and the legal channels to take, which would include coming directly to you as members of Congress.
Both Democrat and Republican lawmakers say that Gabbard's meeting with Assad raises questions about the judgment of someone who is supposed to be the director of the U.S. National Intelligence. Trump has brushed off criticism of Gabbard's face-to-face meeting with Assad, and while Gabbard faced tough questions from both parties, no Republican senator has publicly said they will oppose her nomination. Shifting focus now to the Russia-Ukraine war. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is making it clear that this war needs to end now. In fact, he has warned that Ukraine is being pushed back an entire century. And if the fighting does not stop, its future could be lost. Let's just first get you the details. Rubio, in an interview with an American journalist, painted a rather grim picture of Ukraine's future. He stressed that Ukraine's energy infrastructure is being decimated and the cost of rebuilding will be enormous, adding that millions of Ukrainians have already fled and many may never return. According to him, this war is not just about territorial disputes, it's about the survival of Ukraine itself. Trump's administration, he reiterated, believes the war must be resolved through negotiations. Not just that, he emphasized that both Russia and Ukraine will have to make concessions if there is any hope of peace. But the question is, will Russia and Ukraine be willing to compromise? That remains to be seen. Meanwhile, Russia is accusing Ukrainian troops of committing war crimes in an occupied Russian village located 20 kilometers from the border. Russian officials claim that 22 civilians were executed in cold blood, further alleging that 8 women were raped before being killed. Russia's investigative committee initially reported that at least 7 civilians were killed in the village of Roskoye Porichnoi, just 20 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. That number has now jumped to 22. So far, Ukraine has not issued any official response to the accusations. The Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has said that the world is ignoring these war crimes, accusing Western countries of deliberately turning a blind eye. As per reports, Moscow says 5 Ukrainian soldiers carried out the killings, and one of them has already been captured during combat in the Kursk region. Russia reportedly even released a video of his interrogation in which he allegedly confesses to the crimes. At a press briefing, the Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova, spoke about the incident near the border, saying that first, people were tortured, then they were abused and killed. Listen in.
First, people were tortured and abused, and then either shot with weapons or blown up with grenades. This is the 21st century. Everything has been adopted. Declarations on human rights, etc.
So where are things headed? What happens now? What does all of this mean for the war? You see, the war is not just about land. It's about people, their lives, their future, and the horrifying cost of war. Meanwhile, the mid-air collision between an American Airlines passenger jet and a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter killed 67 people on Wednesday. The latest report saying that over 40 bodies have been recovered so far from the Potomac River near the Reagan National Airport in Washington, D.C., where the wreckage had fallen. Meanwhile, on Friday, U.S. President Donald Trump claimed that the Army helicopter was flying too high at the time of the accident, far above the 200-foot limit. This is despite officials still investigating the case. However, many questions remain unanswered still. Our next report telling you more.
Blackjack 3, can you return to base? I need you to land immediately. If you want to shut them down or if you want to go back here, let me know. I don't know if we're going to resume operations.
The accident happened in the river. Both the helicopter and the plane crashed in the river.
American Airlines CRJ-700 was carrying 60 passengers and 4 crew members when it collided mid-air while landing with an Army helicopter that flew into its flight path. Officials say none of those aboard both the aircraft made it alive. The high-intensity collision sent debris plunging into the river. In the extensive search and rescue operation that followed, the police have pulled out multiple bodies from the chilly waters, with dozens of firefighters still engaged in dive operations at the Potomac River. That could have been us, said a traveler whose flight was diverted soon after the crash, in what is now being reportedly called the first fatal commercial crash in the US since 2009.
Like I said, my mission was to just drive down to Raleigh, jump on a plane and fly back, and no big thing. And then suddenly it's just all different. And people were saying that they were praying that they were going to be okay and that it was just going to be another flight. I've been on tons of flights in my life and never expected it to be.
On Thursday evening, investigators recovered the black box of the US Airlines plane. Its records have been sent to the National Transportation Safety Board labs for analysis. But what led to the crash is still very much unclear. A preliminary report by the Federal Aviation Administration has raised doubts about the air traffic control staffing, calling it not normal. But why was it not normal? Listen in to what really happened inside the ATC.
At 2 spot, Pan 1 is CRJ.
6 Club has a aircraft inside press separation.
American 472 Washington 1 star 32017. Did you see that? 472. American 3130, go around turn left end 250, climb maintain 3000.
Yep, we saw it. And everybody just,
However, no response was received even after the second call. And seconds later, the two aircraft collided. US President Donald Trump suggested at a press conference that efforts to increase diversity at the Federal Aviation Administration could have been a cause of the crash.
We do not know what led to this crash, but we have some very strong opinions and ideas, and I think we'll probably state those opinions now. Because over the years I've watched as things like this happen and they say, well, we're always investigating, and then the investigation 3 years later they announce it. We think we have some pretty good ideas, but we'll find out how this disaster occurred and we'll ensure that nothing like this ever happens again.
The statement has been condemned by former transportation official under Joe Biden's administration as despicable. The fact remains, there are several blind spots in this entire event. Critical questions on operations of the aircraft involve the role of the air traffic controller staff and if aviation safety protocols were duly followed to ensure the passengers' safeguards and avert this fatal flaw that claimed precious lives. With investigations still underway, we'll have to wait for answers in the coming days. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
We have officially entered the era of smart warships. You heard that right. As militaries worldwide are quickly adopting AI, artificial intelligence, the US Navy's USS Fitzgerald has become the first US Navy ship to use an AI system that manages all onboard subsystems. Just to put it simply, the AI will allow the crew to focus on preparing for battle instead of doing maintenance tasks. The goal basically is to reduce unexpected equipment failures and ensure that more ships are ready if a war breaks out and more forces are needed. The system is called Enterprise Remote Monitoring Version 4 or ERM V4. It is part of a Pentagon program called Condition-Based Maintenance Plus. This program basically aims to use machine learning to help ship crews and command centers keep more ships ready for action. The US Navy has introduced the AI system as it prepares for a potential conflict with China. Now, what sets this apart is that this new AI program is the first of its kind to be used on a Navy ship. It is designed to replace the old Integrated Condition Assessment System in use since the 1990s. In fact, on the USS Fitzgerald, the AI program processes about 10,000 sensor readings every second. These are readings from the ship's hull, mechanical and electrical systems. Traditionally, many systems on warships are used until they break, after which repairs are made. With this new system, the crew and shore-based maintenance teams can basically see potential failures ahead of time, improving the reliability of the ship. And there is always a human connection. All maintenance recommendations for ERM V4 are reviewed by the ship's crew. They confirm these recommendations made by the AI. The US is not the only country with AI-enabled warships. Just a few days ago, India launched its first AI-enabled warship, the INS Surat. This warship is expected to enhance India's patrolling capabilities and help narrow the gap with China's naval power in the Indian Ocean region. Its AI capabilities are touted to support predictive maintenance, hazard analysis, and autonomous navigation, all while reducing human errors. It shows that the Indian Navy is transforming into becoming a smart naval power. And China is also working on an AI warship, by the way, reportedly using artificial intelligence to design warship electrical layouts with high accuracy and speed, backed, of course, by funding from the People's Liberation Army. As it stands right now, AI is being used in warships for engineering and maintenance, but experts believe it could also be applied to combat systems in the future. And if that happens, it could fundamentally change the way wars are fought. We are already, in fact, seeing the impact of AI in the ongoing Ukraine war, from autonomous drones to facial recognition algorithms. The war in Ukraine has become a testing ground for the use of AI in warfare. We have come a long way from using bows and arrows. AI in warfare is already a reality. The only question that remains is, who gets there first? On to India, with a budget 2025 almost here, taxpayers are wondering if the government will finally make the new tax regime more attractive. Could long-awaited deductions and reliefs be on the horizon? Have a look at this report as we break down what's at stake for your paycheck.
With India's budget around the corner, all eyes are on potential tax relief measures, especially for salaried individuals. A key expectation is the inclusion of deductions like Section 80C and house rent allowance or HRA under the new tax regime. Currently, taxpayers opting for the new regime miss out on these benefits, making the old system more attractive for many. Reports suggest the government is considering making the new regime more appealing by allowing deductions on HRA. This would provide significant relief for salaried individuals, especially those living in rented accommodations in expensive cities. If approved, it could encourage more taxpayers to shift to the new regime, which offers lower tax rates but currently lacks many exemptions which are available under the old regime. Another major proposal under discussion is increasing the standard deduction limit from 75,000 rupees to 1 lakh rupees. Additionally, a reduction in income tax rates for individuals earning up to 15 lakh rupees annually is being explored to ease the burden on the middle class. Simplification of the Income Tax Act is also on the agenda, with the government aiming to streamline tax calculations, redefine the tax year, and reduce the number of forms required during filing. These changes are expected to make compliance easier and minimize disputes. With the Finance Minister set to present the budget on February 1st, taxpayers are eagerly awaiting announcements that could put more money in their hands while simplifying the tax system. Business Bureau, WION, World is One.
On to Africa now, where the European Union has been accused of enabling migrant slave trade. You heard that right. A new report shows how European policies could be inadvertently fueling human trafficking, with migrants being sold for as little as £10, that's $12. The report, titled State Trafficking, Expulsion and Sale of Migrants from Tunisia to Libya, quote unquote, is based on months of research. It includes testimonies from 30 people from countries like Cameroon, Sudan, Guinea. They all recounted how they are being sent from Tunisia to Libya between June 2023 and November 2024. But the investigation conducted by several humanitarian groups reveals a systematic operation where migrants were rounded up by Tunisian authorities before being sent across the border and sold, reportedly, for £10 per person. The report found that women migrants fetched more as they are used as sex slaves. Up to £75 each, that's $93. In one case, reportedly, a migrant told researchers, quote, "They sold us to the Libyans. I really mean buying and selling like for objects. They sold us like slaves." Which then brings us to the role of the EU. The NGOs that conducted this investigation found that the capture and sale of black sub-Saharan African migrants was being enabled, quote unquote, by the EU and Italy. They both struck deals with the Tunisian government to crack down on migrants and stop boats from trying to cross the Mediterranean. You see, since 2017, Rome has invested nearly $90 million in training and equipping Tunisia's border guards. These agreements have been credited for significantly reducing the number of migrants reaching Italy. And according to one report, there's been a 59% decrease in crossings from North Africa, thanks to the policy. And while these policies have reduced migrants coming in, it has increased severe human rights violations. The migrants are allegedly rounded up in Tunisian cities, transported to detention centers near the Libyan border. From there, they are allegedly sold to Libyan militias. The report also detailing instances of torture, sexual violence and forced labor. The European Commission is yet to comment on this report. In fact, on Wednesday, this report was presented to the EU's Parliament by a group of left-wing legislators. who basically condemned the EU's role in these human rights abuses. The Telegraph cited Spanish MEP Estrella Galan as saying, and I'm quoting, "It is an appalling act of irresponsibility that European funds are being used to facilitate the trafficking of human beings between Tunisia and Libya, reducing lives to mere commodities valued at just 12 to 90 euros. Indeed, this report raises some very serious questions. How can the EU justify these policies knowing that they could enable such human rights violations? It has been over 2 days since the report was presented in the EU Parliament. Why is the EU silent on the matter? Currently, agreements and policies prioritize reducing migration, but they neglect to safeguard human rights. Isn't it time then for Europe to end practices that continue systemic abuses? Why are some lives more valuable than others? Health is wealth, they say, but what if eating healthy takes a lot of your wealth? What if eating healthy is expensive? Let's tell you what we are talking about. Now, we all know that consuming healthy food is absolutely crucial. It's a major way to look after your health. But what if it's more expensive than eating junk food? As per a new report, the cost of healthy eating in the UK has gone up, outpacing price increases for less nutritious food. This is the Broken Plate report by the Food Foundation. It basically looks at the trends impacting the UK's food system and the actions needed to ensure that everyone can afford healthy and sustainable food. And what has it found? How worrying are the takeaways? Let's just break it all down for you. To put it simply, it has found that healthier foods are more than twice as expensive per calorie than less healthy foods and less available. Basically, it reveals that healthier options, lower in fat, salt and sugar, now cost more than double per calorie compared to less healthy alternatives. What this means and what this results in is making matters worse and intensifying the major challenge of maintaining a healthy diet, particularly for low-income families. It found that on average, healthier foods are more than twice as expensive per calorie as less healthy foods, with healthier food increasing in price at twice the rate in the past 2 years. And let's just tell you a little bit more about what the report found. The most deprived fifth of the population would need to spend 45% of their disposable income on food to afford the government-recommended healthy diet, rising to 70% for households with children. Also, it was found that over a third of supermarket promotions on food and non-alcoholic drinks are for unhealthy food. A quarter of the places to buy food in England are fast food outlets, remaining unchanged for 6 years. So what's the way out? Among the suggestions made is to ensure that everyone has sufficient income to afford to eat a healthy and sustainable diet and rebalance the cost of food so healthy and sustainable options are the most affordable. Also restricting promotions on less healthy foods and increased promotions on core staples and more healthy foods, using local authority planning powers to basically prevent further proliferation of unhealthy fast food outlets. Just to mention some of the suggestions. The findings are absolutely concerning and have far-reaching implications, and clearly a lot needs to change. The year 2025 is a landmark year for India-US space cooperation. In the coming months, 2 high-profile India-US space missions are to be accomplished. One of them is the NASA ISRO satellite that will map the Earth in the highest resolution. The other mission will launch an Indian astronaut to the International Space Station. We are talking about Indian astronaut Shubhanshu Shukla and his flight to the International Space Station. Shukla is set to create history as the first Indian astronaut to travel to the International Space Station. aboard a SpaceX Dragon spacecraft later this year. He will pilot the Axiom Mission 4. The mission is part of a joint effort between NASA and the Indian Space Research Organization, the US Space Agency announced on Thursday. In the year 2018, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced India's first ever human space flight program, Gaganyaan, led by the Indian Space Agency ISRO. It's meant to ferry Indian astronauts to space and bring them back safely. While India has been launching satellites to space for more than 3 decades, performing astronaut missions are exponentially sophisticated. Astronaut missions are the pinnacle of spaceflight, while ISRO has been working on the technology and rocketry front. In fact, India's astronaut candidates were chosen from a pool of Indian Air Force test pilots. The chosen candidates were fighter pilots. They underwent their first leg of training in the Yuri Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center near Moscow. In 2023, during Prime Minister Modi's state visit to the US, then US President Joe Biden made a huge announcement. He said that the US would train Indian astronauts to fly to the International Space Station. In August 2024, 2 Indian astronaut candidates, Group Captains Shubhanshu Shukla and Prashant Balakrishnan Nair, commenced their training in the US. Shukla is the primary astronaut candidate, while Nair is the backup. And both of them are training for the US-led mission to the International Space Station, known as Axiom 4. The mission is facilitated by American firm Axiom Space. The 4 astronauts flying on this mission are Peggy Whitson, former NASA astronaut and director of human spaceflight at Axiom Space. She will command the Axiom 4 mission. ISRO, Indian Space Research Organization astronaut Shubhanshu Shukla will serve as the pilot. The 2 mission specialists are European Space Agency project astronaut Stavros Yuznanski-Wisniewski of Poland and Tibor Kapu of Hungary. The crew have been preparing to go on a 2-week trip to the International Space Station. This mission is to be carried out by mid-2025. While Axiom is the facilitator of this flight, the Falcon 9 rocket and the Crew Dragon spacecraft will be provided by Elon Musk's SpaceX. Our principal correspondent, Siddharth MP, explaining how the US-led mission will help India's Gaganyaan program.
This Axiom 4 mission is meant to serve as a precursor for India's Gaganyaan program, where India wants to execute human spaceflight using ISRO, using its completely homegrown technology such as rockets, spacecrafts and much more related technologies. Effectively, Axiom 4 will be more like a training mission for an Indian astronaut before India attempts this completely on its own. From Chennai, Siddharth MP, WION World is One.
And shifting focus, in a remarkable conservation success story, India has doubled its tiger population in just over a decade, demonstrating that large predators can thrive alongside human communities. In fact, the world's largest wild tiger population has surged from 1,706 in 2010 to a rather impressive 3,682 in 2022. India is home to roughly 75% of the global tiger population, and this extraordinary achievement represents a beacon of hope for wildlife conservation worldwide. According to a study published in the journal Science, India's success offers important lessons for tiger range countries that conservation efforts can benefit both biodiversity and nearby communities. The magnificent predators now roam across 138,200 square kilometers of diverse terrain. This area is almost half the size of the UK. India's success stems from a comprehensive approach combining strict anti-poaching measures, habitat protection, and innovative community engagement strategies. India's Project Tiger, launched in 1972 when tiger numbers had plummeted below 2,000, stands as one of the world's most successful and longest-running conservation programs. The initiative's holistic approach has created a delicate balance between wildlife protection and community development, particularly through ecotourism revenues that benefit local populations. These majestic big cats, capable of reaching speeds up to 65 kilometers per hour and weighing up to 300 kilograms, now share their habitat with approximately 60 million people across India. Despite the challenges this presents, successful coexistence has been achieved in several parts, including Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Uttarakhand, Karnataka, where tigers thrive at high densities alongside human settlements. The conservation model success hinges on a dual strategy of land sparing and sharing, proving that both approaches are essential for tiger recovery. While 25% of tiger habitat remains prey-rich and protected, the remaining areas basically demonstrate how humans and wildlife can coexist through careful management and sustainable practices. This achievement offers vital lessons for other tiger range countries, showing that large carnivore conservation can simultaneously benefit biodiversity and local communities as global tiger populations face continued threats from habitat loss and poaching. India's example provides a blueprint for successful conservation in the 21st century. And our next story comes from North Korea. It's about the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, in fact. Now it's emerged, reportedly, that at a meeting of the Workers' Party of Korea this week, the North Korean leader criticized dozens of officials in a rare public rebuke. What for? For misconduct related to a drinking spree, as per state media reports. It was seemingly a routine meeting for the party when Kim Jong-un reportedly turned furious and scolded the officials. Perhaps his aim was to set an example for other cadres who might be tempted to let themselves a bit loose. And in fact, what happened exactly is the immediate question. As per reports, the opening of the event was accompanied by celebrations where some participants seemed to have overindulged themselves with alcohol, leading to Kim Jong-un denouncing them for bad behavior. But this is a rare reprimand from his side, and a surprising one at that. And why so? Because heavy drinking is in fact quite common among North Koreans and by no means regarded as a moral act. But it's not just drinking habits. That drew the ire of the North Korean leader as Kim Jong-un reportedly admonished officials in Oncheon and USI counties where factories are being built as part of the regional development policy that seeks to modernize rural regions, and major ceremonies celebrating the opening of these factory units also involved officials drinking and making merry, as per reports. Senior officials of Kim Jong-un's party also raised concerns over the collective drinking and delinquent behavior, quote unquote, suggesting it to be detrimental for the party's image and principle of discipline. And this is also a comment on the bureaucratic behavior displayed by the elites, which is being seen as, also a means to widen a gap between the party and the local people. And as per reports, Kim Jong-un urges the act of his scolding officials to be a wake-up call to the officials of his party across the country. Will this change how drinking is being perceived in North Korea? Only time will tell. On that note, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas Tonight. This is me, Molly Gambhir, signing off. Thanks very much for watching.
This week on the West Asia Post. Amid a fragile ceasefire in Gaza, thousands of Palestinians return to devastated north. Iran's supreme leader says a tiny enclave has brought Israel to its knees. Meanwhile, Israeli troops are staying put in Lebanon and Syria's Mount Hermon. Also on the show, we talk about US terror list for West Asia and dive into the Gulf's investment list. Watch the West Asia Post with me, Radi Francis, only on WION, World is One.
After killing a governor, a military chief, and foreign peacekeepers, the dreaded M23 rebels force advance into Goma in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The United Nations raises alarm. Nigeria's authorities officially declare the Lakurawa armed group that flogs people for listening to music a terrorist organization and bans it across the country. Lakurawa is a new militant group that carries out attacks targeting local communities in northwestern Nigeria and across the border with Niger. And Japanese adventurer Gump Suzuki arrives in Cape Town at the end of a more than 6,000-kilometer journey across Africa while pulling a rickshaw. That's at these times on World of Africa. On WION, World is One.
This week on Inside South Asia, Afghans who sided with America against the Taliban denied entry to the US under Trump's new immigration order. 6 months after the Yunus administration took charge, Bangladesh's economy is on the brink. Adding to the chaos is the White House cutting off all aid to Dhaka. And tragedy strikes at the Mahakumbh Mela in India. 30 people die in a stampede while 60 million take a holy dip at the Amrit Snan. All this and much more on Inside South Asia.
This week on Tech It Out, we take an in-depth look into what DeepSeek is. We also show you a miniature farming robot and find out how drones are becoming smarter and more sophisticated. All this and more on WION, World is One at these times.
India's budget 2025 is here. Will it fuel growth or deepen inflation's bite? Will it support the rupee and markets? From tax reforms to middle-class relief, we decode what's in it for you. Stay ahead with our expert analysis and global perspective.
This week on the West Asia Post. Amid a fragile ceasefire in Gaza, thousands of Palestinians return to devastated north. Iran's supreme leader says a tiny enclave has brought Israel to its knees. Meanwhile, Israeli troops are staying put in Lebanon and Syria's Mount Hermon. Also on the show, we talk about US terror list for West Asia and dive into the Gulf's investment list. Watch the West Asia Post with me, Radi Francis, only on WION, World is One.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION, World is One.
Know more? Understand better? Think ahead. Hello and a very warm welcome. You are watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Get the facts, not the bombast. On the 26th of March, dynamic pricing, Baloch separatists, Gravitas cuts out the clutter. Gravitas keeps calm when others scream. Gravitas brings news to life. Weekdays, 9 p.m. IST, 3:30 p.m. GMT. Gravitas. Seeing is believing.
Well, thanks for staying with us. You're watching Beyond World is One. My name is Mohammed Saleh, and let's start this broadcast by taking a quick look at what is making headlines at this hour.